Survivor specialist Phil and Alexa are back with the 5th episode of our classic Survivor series. And today we are taking a look down one of the worst memories of memory lane in Survivor history as we discuss what the part 1 and part 2. And we are joined by none other than Andrew Savage, the man who was pretty much decimated by these two episodes. Savage, thank you so much for joining us. Unfortunately, not under the best, not your best episode, right?
No, first of all, thanks, Phil and Alexa, for inviting me and for allowing me to take a stroll down memory lane. It's been a while.
Christian Hubicki had tweeted at you and said, what did he think of the twist? And it is funny at this point because it's really the only thing anybody ever wants to talk to you about when they talk Survivor.
Yeah, it was epic. For sure. I love Christian's tweet, and I replied with, I deeply loved it. It was my favorite thing to think about, always.
Best thing to happen to Survivor.
That's right.
Well, welcome to the next hour where we rehash every single second of it. So what we've been doing for this series then, and I don't know if you know, we also covered the Wentworth Will Not Count. So we've really been hammering home the Savage love here, but what we've been doing for this series, we've been kind of talking about how the episode was at the time, why it's classic, iconic, whatever it is, and kind of how it shaped the way this game of Survivor has been played, what's been good that's come out of it, what's been bad that's come out of it. And I always talk about this episode as one of the most instrumental in the history of the show because of the impact that it had on All-Stars, because of the impact that it had on who became super, super popular from the season, who kind of fell off and doesn't play for 24 seasons. What do you think? Like, obviously you don't know when it's happening, but what do you think like the impact is that maybe people didn't see or don't necessarily realize from this twist?
I think it had many impacts. So when you're out there in the element, you're starving, and it's fascinating, me going back all those years, the summer 2003, and at the time, we're all just a bunch of folks that were big Survivor fans, and it's an adventure of a lifetime. Like, we're amazed that we're actually on. We would look up at the flag, me and Rhino and OT and T, and look at the flag and say, "Can you believe we're on Survivor?" Like, this was the 7th season, and it was this massive. And every day that we survived, because it was so grueling. It's just to back up. Back then, there wasn't a water well with purifying tablets, right? You had to get your water, make fire, boil it for 2 hours to kill all the maggots and stuff. So it was order of magnitude tougher, just in terms of the physical, the environment. So every day you survive was incredible, and we're churning along and getting our butts kicked, and then we even it. And then this Outcast Twist happened, which was the most jaw-dropping thing I've ever seen. But it just rocketed you back 3-4 days, and every day you survive is like a year of survival in the pandemic. I don't want to understate how unspeakable the pandemic has been. It's horrible. But when you're on Survivor, like, you survive a day, you're like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. And then the Outcast Twist, and it's stunning, and it made no sense, and it was also epic. Look, so that I would change the game. I think that because of the twist, there's this succession of folks that got voted out that were making a material contribution to the show. So I went, Ryan went, and the great Rupert went. Would Rupert have voted out if I were still in the game? Not if I had anything to say about it. Rupert and I had a great alliance going. So you look at that epic twist, and it was epic because it was so jaw-dropping and so unsuspected and intended that it did complete. I think what it did, it planted seed with the producers and propes saying, wow, we can really, maybe not exactly doing that again, because that kind of screwed stuff in the show, and we didn't really need it because we had this amazing adventure of a lifetime going, an epic season. But it also planted the seed that let's just throw some crazy twists and turns into the game and see when the dust settles, what results.
And it seems like even all these seasons later, 33 seasons later, going to be coming up on season 41.
Yes.
The one thing that most Survivor fans agree with is once you're out, just be out. And what's funny to me is when this happened in season 7, We don't see a twist like this again until season 22 because people hated it so much. And it really does change the whole entire post-merge of this season. And it's just funny that now all of a sudden we're seeing it all the time. Edge of Extinction was 38. It was 40. Redemption Island 22, 23, 27. It's happening all the time, but it was a 15 season break because the reaction to this was so negative.
Well, and I think part of that, Phil, is we didn't know it was coming. Edge of Extinction, Extinction Island, you kind of know it's coming. You know you're going to wherever it is you're going. This was a total blindside. And so I say that because you can't prepare for it. I mean, you do what you do in the game. That I ostracized Skinny Ryan? Absolutely, I did. But, you know, outplay, outlast. He was gone. And I'm like, out of sight, out of mind. That's cool. You know, I climbed one more rung of the ladder. And if they had told us before, not saying that they should have, but if they told us before, at least you can account for that and modify your game and your strategy. Would I have been nicer to Skinny Ryan knowing that he's coming back in and he's going to come after me with both barrels? So I think that was the difference. And also, I think it got huge ratings, but ultimately I think that the super fans didn't agree with it because there was something really pure about the bedrock of Survivor, which is outlast. Right? Once your torch is snuffed, that iconic probe, snuffing your torch and you're gone, and to violate that, and tribal, right? So tribal is a very sacred place. You don't do things like that. And that's why it was so stunning to me. And I think that's one of the reasons they didn't do it again. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying it was stunning from a viewer perspective too. The players weren't told about it and we weren't told about it. And, you know, Jeff gives a very quick sentence of they were given the same amount of food as you, the same amount of shelter. And that is just immediately moved on from, and we never hear of it ever again.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard about that stuff, but it's...
Don't think so. We haven't.
We have not.
Well, so the reality is, and, you know, folks will disagree, but I have a couple of very reliable sources that folks in the Outcast tribe had 3 squares a day, not a lot of food, but 3 squares. I know where they're staying because when I was voted out, I stayed in the same beachside cabanas. They had fresh running water, and so that in and of itself, right? And
full stop.
Oh my God, we can't even compare. We ran out of food 3 days earlier, weren't getting 3 squares a day, and just that running water, and not to have to maintain your fire and boil that maggot infested water, game changer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Pearl Islands has gone on to become one of the most popular seasons. And, you know, Alexa and I, the episodes we've talked about so far, Survivor Africa, when they did the twist, you know, it's those big moments that everybody remembers because it changed something. But I think Pearl Islands was more popular because of the theme and the characters than because of this twist. And I know when Alexa ranks, and I know when I rank, but Alexa has it even much lower, we never quite put Pearl Islands where a lot of the super fans, I know Adam Klein says it's his favorite season, but for me, it always leaves such a bad taste in my mouth because something that I was talking about today for our patrons was Austin quitting. I mean, you were there, so you know better than me, but I firmly believe that if this doesn't happen, Austin probably doesn't quit the game because the merge is happening. And then he's going to be able to do his individual game. And you guys could cut him loose if you really feel like he needs to go. You could do what they did to Jerry back in Australia.
Totally agree. And so Austin, OT, who's a very good friend of mine, he got a tough edit, I will tell you. He was losing 2 pounds a day. So he's a big body builder. 1% body fat. Think about losing 2 pounds a day. He lost over 40 pounds. So when we were kidding him that he started looking like Jimmy Walker, JJ Walker from Good. You guys are too young to know that show. Anyway, he had 4, maybe 5 staph infections. So it was very serious. But I totally agree. Without that twist, OT would have had protein, right? We didn't have any on our island or whatever. So we were struggling in terms of nutrition, and he would have gotten a belly full of protein. His body would have firmed up again. And, you know, your body affects and controls your mind. So he probably could have rallied him for a few more days, some additional food, and Rupert feeding us with fish, more protein, whole different game. Yeah.
Worth playing for. One of our commenters here just said Austin after 39 days would have looked like Skinny Ryan. Not quite sure about that level, but
I don't know. I think that's probably accurate.
a little bit more muscle, but the skinny part definitely remains. He even, I mean, obviously he is built by muscle, but it looked like there was nothing other than the muscle on his body.
Yeah, exactly. There's no body fat at all. And he, he's, as I said, he's a good friend of mine. He has a heart of a lion, and he's the first to admit that he had no business being in a remote location on Survivor. He's a city guy, and he was out of his element. And the other thing, I think he made it 18, 19 days. And for someone like OT to make it, 18, 19 days on Survivor is like 3 months. I mean, it's unbelievably difficult, especially back then in Pearl Island. So I was proud of him that he made it that far. And, he had, as I said, 4 or 5 staph infections, which are very, very serious. And the ER doc used to come up with 4 challenges. Ado was his name. I don't know if you heard about Ado, but he's a little crazy. He would literally, Austin's massive dude. He had 1 staph infection here in his chest. He had these big pectorals, and you could see about half an inch into his pec, this staph infection.
Oh my gosh.
Ado would come with his tube of Neosporin ointment and just stick it in all the holes in the hospital. He's like, OT, don't worry about it.
Very rudimentary way to cure that.
He's like, dude, staph infection, 1 staph infection, you can die. He's like, you're good. Don't worry about it.
Just get back out there and have Jeff get mad at you when you quit the game. Get out there. Oh, it's so great.
Yeah, saying, Jeff's reaction at Tribal Council is certainly in a different light after hearing that.
Yeah, that reaction was justified.
Yeah.
We were all feeling it. We all felt, especially me and Tawana felt betrayed by OT. Understood when he says at Tribal, OT says, you don't have gas in the tank, you can't run the car. He had no more gas, but still we felt betrayed. I understood what he was doing. I'm wired differently. Tawana's a really tough lady, good, like my little sister. She would never quit, but Probst throwing his, go home, throwing his toes.
Yeah.
The knocking it over is very, that's very symbolic.
Go home.
Yeah. And it was one of those where he might not have had gas, but you were all ready to push him up the mountain if you had to, because you knew. I mean, at that point in Survivor history, I mean, it's funny because then you come out and you play season 31, completely different game. But at this point in Survivor history, the merge was everything. If you went into the merge with numbers, that was it. And especially with what happened with you. So I like to, after rewatching this season a couple times now, I like to kind of compare what happens in Pearl Islands to what Russell does with the FOA 4. He kind of just he cuts who he has to cut, but he keeps so tight with Jason and Mick and Natalie and Russell that they end up being 4 of the final 5. And the only reason they're not the final 5 is because Brett wins immunity. And I feel like that's kind of what this season of Survivor was. And also what ends up hurting you is that you did have that tight, really tight bond, but sorry, Lil, you're not a part of that. And now here she comes smiling at you with her Boy Scout outfit on.
Yeah, that's I take full responsibility. I didn't handle that very well, and there's so many things you didn't see that I can revisit. So many things regarding Lil, and I didn't want her to go home. I don't know if they showed it. I haven't watched the season in decades, but I didn't want her to go home. I actually wanted Dara to go home, but then Rhino had a huge crush on Dara at the time. He said, "Savage, we're not sending Dara home." I sleep next to her. They weren't doing anything, but she's my cuddle buddy. And okay, so then we had to vote out Lil, and it was really difficult. And I didn't handle that particularly well. But Lil and I actually had a really good connection, and she had this amazing work ethic. Say what you want about Lil, she was in charge of the fire, and and it's a huge part of Pearl Islands is your fire, especially when the monsoons were coming through. And so about Lil, when she said, and this is iconic, it kills me. When she says, remember, right before I get on the boat to go to Tribal, remember when I asked you to tell me if I'm going home and you didn't? And I paused because I couldn't remember. I said, what? You're just making that up because I did tell you. So anyway,
right.
And Lil has mentioned this in her post-exit interviews. What happened is right before we get in the boat, our beautiful little old pirate boat to row Tribal, Lil says, Savage, I know I'm going home. And she was in charge of the fire. She said, she walked to the back of the camp, the shelter, and said, here's the firewood. It's under the shelters. It's going to rain tonight. It always does. And here's the matches. They're under that and they're protected. So when I'm gone, you can make a fire, keep the fire going, that kind of thing. And I said, I love you, Lil. Wasn't my decision. And I hugged her, and that was it. So when she goes back in, and she's admitted to this, and she comes back and says, Savage, you didn't tell me. I was thinking, and then the camera cuts away. So anyway.
To Rupert creeping in the background.
That's serious. Yeah, the judgment.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's just fascinating, Alex and Phil, that without that, and we've talked about this back in the day, because I did legitimately have PTSD from it, because it took my heart out. It took away my adventure of a lifetime. That's okay. But I talked to Sean from the Drakes, and he told me he was dying for the merge. If the merge came, he was coming over to us because he just didn't get along with a bunch of the Drakes. And if you think about that, and we go in 5-5, you get the merge, we get one of them to come over with us. Burton and Lil aren't back in the show. Then we're 6-on-4. We pick them off, to your point, Phil, that's the old school Survivor. And then it's 6 of us, and I could do fairly well in challenges. So then then it's a whole different game. So.
Well, I think that, it must have been difficult to explain to Lil why exactly she was voted out, knowing that the cuddle buddy was chosen. So I guess it's good that direct conversation didn't have to happen.
Yeah. She wasn't particularly understanding when she came in. Honestly, what an amazing season, amazing experience. And when it's pouring rain, a massive monsoon coming through, and we know someone's coming back. And we literally said, Morgan said, anybody with Lil, with Lil, we can handle it and we can maneuver. And you couldn't see anything because it was so dark. And she comes with her poncho and her hood, and I couldn't believe it was Lil. And then the other thing is, so Burton's a good friend of mine, right? Burton is just a total stud, great guy, super smart. And afterwards, I was talking to Burton, and he said, Savage, if I would have gone to the Morgan tribe instead of the Drake tribe, you and me together, we would have been final two. One of us would have won the whole damn season. And that's the beauty of Survivor. It's just one little thing here and there, just picking a buff. If Lil would have just picked a Drake buff, we would have had Burton. Like, my gosh.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so interesting, and that's what started in season 3, because in the first 2 seasons there was no swaps, there wasn't anything like that. And then in season 3 they have that first time of Silas, Teresa, and Frank walking out there in big time, and it's like, if it would have just been somebody different, what would have happened? And we have a comment in here that's like, would the grandma lie have never happened if the Outcast twist never happens? And who knows, it might not, because Sean, Alexa did, she's going to be right back, but Sean was ready to kill Johnny Fairplay. Fairplay was going to, as we see at the beginning of this episode, which I do want to ask about, Fairplay was almost getting his head popped off by Rupert.
Yes.
And so you have these, yet the Drake tribe wasn't the tighter tribe, even though they're the ones who end up ultimately going further in the game. It's not because they were tighter than Morgan. They were just kind of there. And I think, like you said, that's the beauty of it, though. And that kind of started in the 3rd season, not in the first 2. And now it's just gotten to the point of it's so random that half the time you can't even tell what's going on.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating observation. If you think about it, and I was talking to Burton afterwards, and what would we have done? And it's fun to move the puzzle pieces around to see, without the Outcast twist, what we would have had. Or if Burton came to us, Lil went to the Drakes, ultimately we would have gone after Fairplay because we could not stand him. He was annoying, and he was doing his Fairplay persona, trying to be famous. And we're on the show not to be famous. We're on there for the venture of a lifetime. And so Fairplay's doing all this nonsense, and we would have lopped his head off. So think about that. Then we don't get the dead grandmother live, which is absolutely epic, right? So it'd be horrible not to have that absolutely epic moment on Survivor, and one of the greatest moments in the history of reality television, honestly.
And I always go here, but if the Outcast just doesn't happen, probably don't get the dead grandma lie. Rob and Amber aren't married, because Rob probably doesn't go back, because Jeff has admitted that it would have been you if you didn't go when you did. Yeah. So there's all these little things, and who knows what Survivor is today. And there's this alternate reality where people are sitting here and we're sitting down with Andrew Savage, winner of Survivor Pearl Islands. But it is one of those just fascinating, ridiculous things.
Winners at war. I could have been.
You would have been out there with Tony.
You could have been the next Tony.
But here's not a funny, but interesting story. So Pearl Islands just knocked me on my back. All of us, really. It was unbelievably difficult. So I'm back in Chicago, living in Chicago at the time. And I'm literally on, it's probably 3-4 days afterwards. I'm at the park with my daughters and my wife, and my cell phone, little flip phone, buzzes, and it's Lynn Spielman, casting director of Survivor. She says, "Hey, Savage, just checking in. How you doing?" I said, "I'm good. Great to be home. A little sore, but what's going on?" She said, "I just wanted to check. Would you do it again?" Now, understand, this is before there's even a concept of an all-star season. And I said to, what a dumbass I was. I said to Lynn, I'd have to think about it maybe a couple of years down the road, because I had, nobody knows this. I had 30% liver failure. I had a bunch of
oh my gosh,
infestations in my liver, so I wasn't doing that great. So I said, yeah, in a couple of years, I'd love to consider it. Say, all right, thanks. Bang, hung up. And my sense is, because I didn't know Rupert, I didn't know the next season was an all-star season. My sense is she was feeling me out to say, Savage, we may have a slot in the all-star season. What are you thinking? But, yeah. So I blew it.
At the sake of asking a very invasive question, how did the post liver infection recovery period go? That must have been really difficult, especially after coming off of such a devastating vote out in the actual game. I'm sure that was really salt on the wound.
Actually, it wasn't bad at all.
That's great.
But there's a lot of cranberry juice, and the liver is unbelievably resilient. So
that's wonderful. Great to hear.
So what you're saying is you should have went out for all-stars and just like worked up like 70-80% and then gone back and worried about it.
That's right. I could have just drank a bunch of whiskey. It would have killed all the infestations, all the bugs.
You can play Survivor without a liver. You'll be fine.
Whatever was in that stupid treasure chest on Pearl Islands, I'm sure that would have killed whatever was inside.
Fairplay's told me that it was even worse than he mentioned in that episode. It was absolutely disgusting. But the other
I believe it.
We show up for the live finale, and Rupert shows up in his tie-dye, and he's svelte. Like, he's a big dude, right? Big belly, modern day pirate, but he was so skinny. And I looked at Rhino and OT and I said, something, because we didn't know about an all-star season. We did. It was like, what? Did he never leave Pearl Islands? Did he just stay there? And so we knew something was up. And it's amazing, because he is a tough guy. It's amazing to think that they started filming 3-4 weeks after we got back from Pearl Islands. So he came home to Indiana, back out to Pearl Islands. That's
insane.
Yeah.
Such a short period of time.
Yeah.
And then he's final 5 or something crazy.
Yeah, he was what, 4th? I think he was 4th, because then Jenna Lewis was 3rd. I mean, that's incredible, especially on back-to-back seasons. And now, so here's what I want to ask you, though, because this was the beginning of at the beginning of this episode at the beginning of What the Fairplay and Rupert have their massive blow up. Now, I know you're not on that island, but I still want to ask. Yeah. So you're seeing Rupert, he's a big character. You know, he's larger than life. You know that this is going to be the most, you had to have known at the time, probably, this is going to be kind of the star of our season, even though you're only seeing him from the other side. But Rupert is threatening to pop his head off, choke him to death, all of these things. And then Rupert goes on to be the biggest hero in Survivor history, or at least that's what we're told.
Yeah.
What was it about Rupert? And what was it about Fairplay in the little bit of interaction you actually got with them that made it okay for Rupert to say this, go on to win the most popular player after All Stars, because he ends up winning that award, and then go on to be the most popular hero, arguably, in the history of the show?
I think it's a couple things. So first of all, Rupert is larger than life, and he's almost a cartoon character. So you think about Pearl Islands that came out the same summer of Pirates of the Caribbean, Johnny Depp. Perfectly synced. They didn't time it like that, but it was just perfect. Everyone was obsessed with pirates in the Caribbean, and here we are in Pearl Islands, and it's a pirate thing. And guess what? We've got a modern day pirate on Pearl Islands, and it's Rupert. And that's who he is, with a big beard. And he's also this really cool kind of hippie guy. And I think also what resonated, and he is a hero. Like, he's selfless in the sense that he's great in the water with the Hawaiian sling and getting fish for his tribe, and like, he's a big family man. And your family is your tribe in Survivor, and he's supporting and supplying food and all the things that you need to get to survive in Survivor, and he's doing that. He's supporting his family. I think there's also this element, and you think about these different characteristics that create this Rupert hero, right? And he is a hero in the sense of all the things that he could do, and he's selfless, and he's great in challenges, and he's strong, and he's relatively honest, right? He doesn't seem to have a mean bone in his body. And the other thing I think that resonated with folks is that he had a lot of insecurities. Like he and I spent a lot of time together talking when he was growing up and he was bullied. He was the fat kid. He was not popular and all that stuff. And you saw some of that in Pearl Islands. There was a lot more of it. But that factors into, here's this big burly guy that is selfless. He's providing for his tribe. He's a hero. And then you just flip the coin and you got fair play, right? Yeah. Arguably the greatest villain in the history of the show. And fair play, that was his goal. He wanted to be a villain, and he's kind of wired that way. He's a buddy of mine now, but on the show, I could not stand him. I literally wanted to knock him out. And and I think so. You have survivors about old school survivors about big personalities, and you have the perfect villain, and you have the perfect hero. And the hero you love to see. You don't want to see some James Bond kind of guy that is perfect and no insecurities. You got a hero. He's a modern day pirate, and he has some insecurities, and he's very honest about that, right? And you saw it with Burton and Sean kind of making fun of him when Rupert had his skirt on, right? Some vulnerabilities. So
I think it says a lot that the hero is a real person, and like you said, not he's not Batman. The hero clearly was vulnerable, and I think it also speaks to how good of a villain Fairplay was, that he made the ultimate hero into a bad guy in that scene.
Yeah.
It's when Batman almost lets Joker die, almost lets him go, almost ready, but catches him at the last second. And yeah, I just love that, because I just think it's so interesting. Like we've had Fairplay on, we've gone on Fairplay's podcast a bunch, because he's just fun to talk to. And I brought that up to him, like, remember when Rupert like threatened to pop your head off? He's like, nice guy, right? And it's like, but he also knows that by him leaning into that, he's just playing into his heel mentality. Like, he loves it. He just loves it. And that was like the first time though we'd seen anything even remotely close to that on Survivor or on a CBS show. Normally that was reserved for something else, for WWF at the time. Like, that's what it was meant for. We were just not prepared for it. And he was just crazy.
Well, let me tell you, so Rupert and I spent a lot of time together after the show, friend of mine, and that was a real scene. Like, Rupert said he was this close to popping his head off. And Rupert was unbelievably strong. He could have done it like that. And if you look closely at that scene with Fairplay was terrified. That was super real. And Rupert was on the verge. Well, anyway, so that's a very real scene. I love they kept it in there. But here's a couple of crazy things. Just the different things that could have happened on the show and completely changed the dynamic. And also future seasons is there's a very clear clause in the contract that if you hit somebody, if you assault or batter someone, you're out. No questions asked. So if Rupert had taken another step, shoved him or punched him or something, Rupert could have been out. Producers may have stepped in and said, sorry, you're out. Another thing, I'm a lawyer, teasing Rupert about this. In the contract too, there's a clause that says you have to abide by all local laws. Wherever you are, wherever the location is, you have to abide. You can't, if you violate the law, you're immediately ejected from the game. So think about the first episode when Rupert stole my insert. It says pirate pillage, pirate steal. He stole my inserts. And in Panama, if you violate the law, you're presumed guilty, not innocent. So
nice.
I was teasing Rupert, saying, dude, you should have been ejected first episode. You broke the law. You stole my inserts. And he's like,
your impressions are 10 out of 10 so far. Did he ever give those back to you?
No. So those $500 inserts. He said, I'll pay you back.
I'm telling you right now, if you want to get Panama on the phone, we could get Rupert now. I mean, that is the way these days. Let's bring up the past and let's get him out of here. But no, I love that. I mean, who would think that would be in there? I mean, we're praising him for stealing. And again, he's the hero because he's stealing your clothes. And there's OT running around in his buzzed underwear the rest of the season because he has no clothes left. Yeah. But that's what heroes do. They take the shirt off your back. They don't give it to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Something I want to ask, because obviously you ended up playing very far into the future, but you didn't plan another season where there was anybody who came back. But how we see this all the time now in anything where a player returns. Why do you think that Survivor so badly wanted Lil and Burton, the two people who came back, to be immune, and especially at the merge when that happened? Because I was watching this one today to prepare, and I said to myself, okay, have Lil and Burton come back at final 12, call it. They can vote out Austin and they can vote out Sean.
Yes.
And that's it. And then they're not immune at the next one. But instead they come in after that and then they're immune at the merge. Why do you think they wanted to do that?
I think so. I asked Probst that afterwards. I said, not only was the Outcast Twist BS, but giving them immunity first rival is even more BS, right? They should have to, they got in there, they had 3 days to work their magic and not get voted out. That seems fundamentally fair. And Probst essentially said they wanted to give them a fair shake so first of all, they didn't know, obviously, Lil's coming back to Road Tribe. Mm-hmm. But what they did know is that there was a merge. So tribes, may not matter. You're going to be in a merged tribe. And he wanted to give them a fair shake in terms of give them a little bit of time, a little bit of runway to reestablish connections and strategies and all that nonsense, which I think is just nonsense. And the reality is, anyway, if you see that one scene, I was so dumbfounded and stunned when Probst comes out, your past is coming back to haunt you. The Outcast, I call them the Misfits, come back in.
Yeah.
And Rhino had to tell me about the fact that Lil or Burton, whatever, were immune. I didn't even catch that. I was so incensed and so starving and sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting that they were even able to participate in the immunity challenge because they're obviously already immune. And, with Burton winning, that just sort of gives him another chance to even integrate even more into the group for him to give away that immunity. So I thought that was a odd choice.
Yeah, and Burton was an amazing competitor. I don't know if you know this, but he was on the original Eco Challenge, which Mark Burnett created.
I didn't know that, but that's great. Yeah, that's a real deal type show. That's bad.
Yeah, you want to talk about the real deal. So that was his inroad. I think he got to know Burnett, and of course he should be on Survivor. He's this amazing competitor and athlete, crazy smart. But yeah, you're right, Alexa. Letting Burton compete in that water challenge, whatever, keyhole challenge, he's got a significant, because he's a triathlete as well, he's got a significant chance of winning that. He's like a fish in the water. And so that was, here's another funny thing that you never saw. So Burton gets immunity. He already has immunity. He won individual immunity. So we're going to tribal. And we're so tired. And I said to Rhino before the cameras were on, I said, Rhino, go talk to Burton, right? The notion being, and there was a gag order, right? You cannot talk when the cameras are off, or else you get the wrath of Mark Burnett. You don't want the wrath of Mark Burnett. But I said to Rhino, so go talk to Burton. And Rhino looked at me and he said, why? And the producer came over and said, Savage, shut up. You know the rule. I'm like, all right. I wanted Rhino, because he's standing next to Burton, to say, Burton, give me or Savage one of those immunities.
Yeah. And you wanted Rhino to do it because he could take the wrath of Mark Burnett, but not you.
I already had the wrath of Mark Burnett when we got naked in the first episode. Mark Burnett came up to us at Tribal. He said, Savage, so that was really entertaining. I can't do his accent. That was really entertaining. And I'm sure, the fans will love it. He looked at me. He's this close to my face. He says, don't effing ever do that again.
Message received.
I said, yeah, so I didn't want to do it in the first place, dude, but trust me, I'm not getting naked again.
Yeah.
Oh my
And that's why Austin is just stuck the rest of the time. Morgan Team Unity, goodbye. But it's funny to me as we talk about this, because you're saying like, oh, this was so awful. Why do they get to compete even in the challenge? All of that. When Survivor starts, the basic element is here's 8 people and 8 people going against each other. What do you have to do in those first 3 days to not go home? You have to either win the immunity challenge or integrate yourself into the tribe. And so I do understand where that frustration, especially because this is something that has carried through year after year after year, where Rick Devens comes back onto the show and he's able to have an idol right away. And that happens in season 38. And he goes all the way to the final 4. And Chris comes onto the show. Natalie comes onto the show. Like, they all have idols now when they're coming back. And it's like, all right, if you had to get into the game again after being voted out, the way I look at it is do what Burton did. Burton never had to use his immunity. that he had because he won immunity, and then he could have just kept it for himself anyway. And he went all the way to Final Five by just playing the game as well as he could have played it for himself. So that always leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And it's crazy to me that, again, the legacy of this episode is obviously not good. It's iconic, but it's not iconic in the way of like Star Wars. It's iconic in the way of whatever the bad equivalent of Star Wars is. And then, but it still comes up all the time. It's not like it's a one-off and it's been done. It comes up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, fascinating, the seeds that Pearl Islands, the Outcast Twist planted in the producers, even Probst, Tom Shelley, the executive producer at the time, to have, to plant those seeds in terms of twists and turns and getting away from what I think is some of the strongest seasons of Survivor, which is the old school Survivor, just focus on big personalities. You don't need fire tokens, and hidden immunity idols, I think, is even too ambitious now or too popular now. You said earlier, Phil, it's sometimes you have difficulty figuring out what the heck's going on. I loved Winners at War, but fire token, I still don't know what the hell a fire token is. And the hidden immunity idols, it's tough to keep track of those things. So.
I don't know if the players knew what fire tokens were either. It's pretty complex.
Yeah.
Based on Nick's response, I would say no. I mean, fire tokens are this is how I would describe it: a form of currency that you can't use to buy anything. Like you just use it when you're being, extorted. That's the only time you can use them. So, which I guess, Savage, if in Fiji extortion is actually illegal, then Tony should have been fined, and what Natalie and Parvati should have been kicked off the game. So I'm just saying.
Call the Fijian police. Get them on.
Get them out there.
That was it. So at the, after the immunity challenge, did you know that it was you that they were targeting, or was your group sort of, I guess, feeling a little Russian roulette-y? How did you, were you surprised to see your name?
One of the beautiful things about Survivor is it teaches you better self-awareness. And when I got back from Pearl Islands, I've been married 25 years, most amazing person, Steph, my wife, and she asked me that exact same question. And I told her that I didn't think there was any chance I was going home. Like, I was the old guy out there. I was the old guy. I know, who is an incredible athlete, super fit. Why wouldn't you go after him? He has a shot at winning back-to-back immunities. And so when Krista votes me out, she said, "You're the biggest threat out here." And I saw that. And I told my wife that was stunning to me. I never thought of myself as a threat. I just didn't. And so I didn't think, and also Krista and Rupert were great liars, right? So we're feasting, and I thought I had a great thing going with Rupert. And Krista pulled me aside, said, "You, Savage, Rupert, and me, Sand, were Final Four. You in?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in." I had a couple sips of wine and said, "Hell yeah, I'm in. That's awesome." So I go back to the Morgans, and I didn't for a second think they're coming after me, but then I got the horrible sense of Lil, and I started thinking, whoa, because again, remember, Lil and I had a wonderful relationship. We really admired each other, and I didn't vote her out, right? I didn't organize her ouster, and I told her she was going home. So then I started thinking, well, what if she, she spent a lot of time with Burton. What if she's coming after one of the Morgans? Not me, but I'm thinking about Rhino or T or D. And then I started thinking, wow, maybe we should go talk to Lil. But, I'm a dumbass. I never thought that I was a threat or that they were coming after me. And so.
Yeah, and I always find it interesting, like, what if somebody else had been voted in? And that's like one of those big what ifs that's so hard. But, there were some really Burton was a lock. As soon as Burton was voted off, this was the perfect season for Burton to be voted off early because he was going to come back no matter what. There was no way they weren't going to vote him in. But like, if Michelle comes back into the game, or if Trish comes back into the game, who was already trying to get rid of Rupert, and every time I watch that episode, I go, how the hell did that not work? Yes. Or if it's Skinny Ryan who comes back in, he probably has the same reaction towards you as Lil did, but they might not side with him as easily. Like, it could have just went so many ways. And the fact that it was Lil, who really, it seems like, at least on the show, you're the only one that built a relationship with her. It doesn't seem like anybody else on Morgan was doing anything, at least from the edit.
Yeah.
It almost haunted you that you had built a relationship with her more than anything.
Yeah, and it did. It haunted me. And Lil was, if you will, an easy mark. right? She's a nice lady, and you could win her over. And I didn't have to do anything. We just had a wonderful relationship. But did you ever hear? You ever hear why Lil was voted back into the game? You ever talk to Trish or Michelle?
No.
Oh,
and it always blows my mind.
I'd heard rumors, but I don't.
Right,
I'm curious what you're going to say.
We traveled throughout the mountains of Panama, non-jury folks, and they told me that Lil was a lock to get back in the game because this is kind of a mean boy comment. It's not coming from me. They voted her back in because they didn't like her and they couldn't stand her. They didn't want her going on the Mark Burnett all expense paid vacation throughout the mountains of Panama. True story.
Wow. I wasn't sure if that was true or not. Wow.
Crazy though, right? Because this is sacred. This is survivor getting back into the adventure of a lifetime, and they do it because they don't want to hang out with her.
Yeah, and that's to me mind blowing because like just work harder to get yourself voted back in so you don't have to hang out with her.
Right.
Like, if that's what you want so bad.
Yeah. I mean, I found Michelle, who's a very good athlete as well, and Trish for that matter. I think she played college soccer or softball. And why don't you do exactly that, Phil? Just orchestrate your own vote to get back in the game instead of worrying about somebody that's going to annoy you.
And I do feel like Michelle is one of the big missed opportunity, not to get too sidetracked, but I do feel like she's a big missed opportunity from early Survivor because she just got stuck with Sean and Burton, but she didn't do anything wrong. And I feel like she would have been a fun character had she been allowed to stick around a little bit longer.
Totally agree. I think she had so much more to her. And I got to know her when we were traveling throughout Panama. She's a blast. Like she's a big personality. There's a reason she got on the show, and you didn't see a lot of that personality out. And we had a blast together. You can imagine me and Austin, OT, and Sean and Michelle and Trish just traveling throughout and whitewater rafting and all these really cool places in the mountains of Panama. It was so fun, and you really got to know each other. Yeah, so I totally agree. Missed opportunity, Michelle. Plus, she's tough. She's a tough lady. She's perfect for Survivor.
So, what do you think? Because this is, a little look ahead because we've been talking about it, but what do you think the actual legacy of this episode is? Like, was this episode, this two-parter, was this good for Survivor ultimately, where it did lead to some stuff as we've talked about this whole episode? Or was it bad for Survivor because it opened this Pandora's box of once you're out, you could potentially come back in?
Yeah, I think it's great for Survivor. And I say that because it broke the mold, right? And Survivor was, and still is, a top 10 show or top 15 show. And I hated, obviously, the Outcast Twist. It wasn't necessary. It would have still been an epic season. But I think it was good for the show, good for the producers to do it because they experimented, right? They didn't take the safe route. They had this epic season going. And they said, you know what? And as I understand it, they had the Outcast Twist. They didn't have to implement it. They didn't have to greenlight it. They had it in their back pocket. And as the show goes, you're on day 15, 16, they think to themselves, should we do this? And what I like about, what I actually admire about Probst and Tom Shelley and those that were calling the shots is they didn't take the safe route in Mark Burnett. They said, you know what? Let's roll the dice. Let's do the craziest thing that Survivor fans will ever see. No one knows it's coming. And let's just see what happens, right? So that was aggressive. It was ambitious. I hated, obviously, the fact that it pinched me in the butt. But if you plant that seed that, and that's, at least, so I'm in the corporate world, and that's how companies succeed. You think outside the box. You break the mold of what you're doing. Don't rest on your laurels and just do the same thing over and just hope that you continue to be successful. You got to think outside the box, break the mold, and take some chances and be aggressive and courageous about it. And that's what that twist was. And so I applaud it.
And I think it did take a huge risk. And I people obviously feel a certain way about it, but I think you're right in the sense that, if we never have a tribe swap in Africa, then is Survivor just going to continue to be the exact same thing? And clearly it took them a really long time to bring back the concept of bringing back someone who was already voted out. So I think it's a risk worth taking. And I think that it's clear why they've only implemented it a few times.
Exactly. And you think about, all the press afterwards. Did Mark Burnett jump the shark? Did Survivor jump the shark? that's silly. Like when you got 15, 20 million super fans, nothing's going to jump the shark. Right?
And I do think for them, knowing that All Stars was in the mix for season 8, because that's definitely something that had probably been circulating, even if it wasn't solidified, might give them a little bit more motivation to take this risk. Because to do this in season 6 and then ask people to come back for season 7 and have it just be all newbies again, maybe people, but when you do it for season 7 and then say, and next season we have 18 of your favorite contestants of the most popular reality TV show of all time, people are going to forget about that Outcast Twist real quick. And honestly, if it hadn't been for how many returning player seasons started to come up and the fact that you weren't on the ballot for them, or that Burton wasn't coming up on the ballot for them, even though, he had been voted back in, if it hadn't been for that, it might not have come up as much as it has over time. But now people can't help it because they're always talking about, well, who's been the most screwed in Survivor history, or who should get a second or third or whatever millionth chance they deserve.
Yeah, I like the Outcast Twist in the sense of, I look at Survivor and it's an extreme slice of life, right? And what is life? Life is high highs and low lows and curveballs, right? We all know that life is very tough, and you try to maximize the high highs, minimize the low lows. But you got to take those curveballs in life as they come, and you do your best. And that Outcast Twist, again, extreme slice of life, that was this massive curve. And how did it play out? How did you handle it? I blew it. Others did well, and that's just part of life. And you have to learn from that, pick yourself back up, and keep on stroking. So,
yeah. And you mentioned one thing that I love that you said is talking about the safe route. And I think that's a big problem. A lot of fans talk about how they want Survivor to go back to basics. Yeah. Now, back to basics, I don't think will ever happen. It's too far back to basics. What is back to basics? Are we going to Guatemala back to basics where there's at least one idol? Are we going to Australia where there's no twist? Like, what are we going with? And I think when you said the safe route, what's actually interesting here is I feel like Survivor has gotten safer with a lot of the decisions that they're making. Everything seems to be a twist on an idol or on what's happening at tribal. It doesn't feel like there's a twist on stuff outside of that they're doing anymore. Alexa and I had talked about in one of our patron podcasts about why don't they do schoolyard picks anymore? Why don't we see, the actual, the part of the game that we saw in your season where if it was a schoolyard pick and you said, I want Rupert, everybody knew Rupert got picked first. Now they say it, we watch it, and Carl's sitting over there mad that he can't drink a beer because he can't go on the reward, but we don't know why he wasn't picked. We don't know who didn't pick him. And so that's just the one thing. I hope that maybe these fire tokens are their way of going back against the safe route, and we just didn't get a good grasp on it in season 40. But I do hope that they stop just trying to be like, well, here's an idol, and here's an idol nullifier, and here's an extra vote, and here's a steal a vote, and you lose your vote. And it all just feels like it's all iterations of the same thing, rather than that big, massive, whoa, what was that we were just never expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I the way I think about twists and Survivor is Survivor's fair game. You say, well, that was unfair. What? It's
life
Survivor.
isn't fair.
Life is unfair, and Survivor is fundamentally unfair. That's the whole purpose of the show, right? To make things unbelievably difficult and unfair, and see how you fare. So I think about twists, and I love the biggest of twists and turns, as long as it fundamentally doesn't erode the gorgeous fabric of Survivor, right? As long as it isn't too much. But I love when producers push the envelope and reinvent itself, as long as it doesn't, again, unravel the framework of Survivor and what we all love about the greatest adventure on television.
Yeah, which in our opinion, Alexa, not to speak for you, but Edge kind of starts to unravel that a little bit.
It's close, but it hasn't yet.
Yeah. I do feel like, at least with the Outcast Twist, as controversial as it was, there was still a chance for everybody in the game. Yes, it's annoying that Burton and Lil ultimately had immunity, but there was still a chance for everybody. Whereas I feel like with this Edge thing, we watch Natalie come back from Edge of Extinction, go to Final 3, and you're like, oh, okay, like she gets more votes than Michelle, but did Michelle even talk to Ethan out on the island? Did she even talk to Dan? Like, you don't know what was going on, who the conversations were. So I don't know. I just feel like with the Outcast, at least it was okay. It's at the merge. This is where it's happening. We're done.
We're
Not
done.
like, all right, Matt Elrod, you get to be the second person voted out, and you somehow make it to final 5, essentially. Even though I think he got like 7th place in the game, but whatever. So
it's fascinating to reflect on it, and I'm back in the moment when the Outcast Twist happened and trying to figure out what is going on and what does it mean for the next handful of days, and it was just devastating. Because the funny thing about Survivor is, it's a TV show, but when you're in it, when you're so into it, and it is, because there was no returning players. That's was season 7. I get one shot. And what a lot of folks don't know is I wanted on Survivor so badly. I was a semifinalist for season 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And every group dynamic, I got nixed. And so finally, season 7, I'm on. And I know this, so that was over a number of years, right? And I just got my hopes up every time. And so finally I'm on the show, and that's it. This is my one shot. And the Outcast Twist happened, which significantly jeopardized my adventure of a lifetime. Never for a second thinking that I would ever have a second chance of getting back on the show. Devastating.
And as time went on, did you think you were ever getting that call? Because it took a long time before you actually came. Were you getting calls in between, or was it just kind of radio silent for a while?
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 different seasons where I got the call saying that Savage are thinking about this type of season. Are you in? And every time I said, heck yeah, I'm in, count me in. And then I would get the call saying, we want a different direction. So I think it was 3, 4 times over the years. And so it got to the point where I just had to mentally come to grips with the notion that, I had my adventure of a lifetime. Like so many people, they get 40,000 applicants, they pick 16, whatever. So I was super lucky to be selected on such an iconic season. So I just got in my mind, I just said, Savage, you got to close the door, close the book, close the chapter. Survivor, you're done. Be grateful. It was amazing, and just be done with it. And then the second chance, really, you're just going to mentally rape me again? And anyway,
and that one was sort of all the more special because you were voted in, which I'm sure that opened up a lot of odd wounds. But the fans chose you, so that there must have been something really satisfying about that.
It was unbelievable and so humbling, because I thought, if you look at the 40 folks on that list, some real amazing survivors, I thought, again, didn't have a chance, didn't have a snowball's chance in hell I was getting voted on. And when I did, and I'm sitting next to Terry Dietz, and Probst at the Dirty 30, season 30 live reunion show, and he's going around and he's saying, Dietz, you're on. I'm like, I can't believe it, I'm not on.
Right.
Me and Dietz, right? We're like brothers. And so anyway, getting on was, again, humbling. And I just couldn't believe that the fans did that. I honestly thought that why would anyone ever remember me? They may remember the Outcast Twist or Fairplay or that grandmother or Rupert. Like, I'm just a lawyer that happened to be on the Morgans. And so it was just so satisfying. And it was just so thrilling. And what it did is I carried around Pearl Islands for years and years, despite me, in my mind tweaking things, saying, okay, I'm good. I don't have to go on the show again. That was BS. I was done. Every week I think about it. And then to have that opportunity was everything to me. And I'll tell you, it sounds so silly and funny, but it was one of the greatest things that I ever did, just because I got redemption. Because Pearl Islands haunted me for years, 12 years, whatever. And I was able to go back, and you guys saw Cambodia, that I got knocked on my back, flat on my back so many times, like fighting and getting back up. And what that did for me is it purged the Pearl Islands Outcast demons from me. It really did. So I came back after Cambodia just a changed person from a survivor standpoint. I'm like, now I'm good. I got my redemption.
Yeah.
Right. Different demons to deal with.
Now let me ask, now that it's been like 5-6 years, if they were to call you again, is the other Savage going to be like, all right, fine, I'm not done with it, I'm ready to go back? Or what do you think?
So first of all, I don't think they would call. I don't know. Maybe they would. I don't know. But I would have to, so it's a 60-day commitment, right? So I never say never. And so I'm 6 months ago, I left Yahoo. I was a lawyer at Yahoo. Now I'm at Adobe. Adobe is one of the greatest companies I've ever seen, and the people are amazing. So it would take a lot for me to take 60 days out of my Adobe life and go back to Fiji. And but I'm not saying I wouldn't, but it'd have to be something pretty spectacular, super cool theme, and just really amazing players and a great premise. I would tell you, I was talking to Jeremy Collins, a good friend of mine, and we were talking a couple of years ago. This is before Winners at War. Would he do it again? Would I do it again? And we both said, if it's in Cambodia, that's a really strong no. Like Cambodia was the most horrible place I've ever been.
The conditions there just seem horrendous.
Well, so many.
Go ahead.
See, no, just absolutely horrendous.
Well, I was gonna say it's a big indicator when even production, who's staying in like hotels and eating, doesn't want to ever go back there. I think that'll tell you all you need to possibly know about that.
Yeah, there was folks got really sick. Right, John Kerhofer, who leads the art team. The art team is the ones that make all the challenges. Kerhofer's just amazing. He got bitten by something. Was in the hospital in Cambodia during filming when I was still on the show because he just didn't show up. I'm like, where's he?
Yeah. Yeah. Big dude, big goatee, all that stuff. Like, where's he at?
How we doing his challenge, his baby.
And then you go to the next season and half the cast is evacuated. So it's really just, it was a tough 1-2 punch there.
One thing I just remembered, speaking of being in the hospital, is in Pearl Islands. So I get voted out, and within a day I get jungle fever. So I think it was in my system already. And so I had 104 temperature, very, very serious. They almost airlifted me out. And what I was also told is half the crew for Pearl Islands, the crew got jungle fever. 105 temperatures and just wiped out half the crew.
It's insane. And maybe that's why they keep going back to Fiji now, because they know that there's nothing too crazy going on in Fiji. And especially makes sense that it was after Cambodia that they said, screw it, we're staying here, because Cambodia, I mean, you've in Koh Rong, you have 3 people get medevaced, and I mean, one of them almost died. Like, it wasn't anything lighthearted going on out there.
Very serious. They had these green viper snakes, highly venomous. They were everywhere. They had poisonous spiders. I almost lost one of the toes on my right foot. I got infected with some massive spider. I still have the fang marks in my toe, and the infection. Almost lost my toe. It almost went up my foot. I had antibiotics and stuff. So,
oh my gosh,
horrible place.
And what I love is, though, you're like, I mean, I'd have to take off 60 days of work, but I'd probably do it again. I lose my limbs,
Cambodia.
But whatever. Not Cambodia, but anything else, I'm fine. You can cut off my arm. I'm ready to go.
It shows how crazy some survivors are, but it also shows you the genius of the show, how addicting it is, and that's the genius of the show. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've kind of determined the legacy of this episode. It was good for Survivor, even if ultimately stop bringing back people who were voted out. I mean, that's kind of where we're at here.
Short-term good, long-term bad.
Long-term bad. And season 42 is Abby versus Savage. That's what we have on the docket. So just get him his 60 days off. Him and Abby are going out there, and that's all we want. What did you think? So this is kind of like the last thing. We can kind of wrap it up. But what did you think? So you get voted in. It was exciting, all of that. And then you get out there, and like we just rewatched your boot episode in Cambodia, and everybody was always like, "Oh, Savage, he was just overplaying." But and I'm like, "Oh, that was like him saying, hey, whatever you guys want to do. Like, I've learned from my leader mistakes. I'm ready to go." But what was your reaction kind of to the reaction of you after not playing for so long? Thinking I'm probably forgotten, who's going to remember me here. And then you come out and you play season 31 and you go out with the middle finger up, and then you go and you're hanging out with Cass at Ponderosa. And it's actually very fun when you get to Ponderosa. Yeah. But what was kind of what were you expecting, and how was it different being from season 7 to now like a really established reality television show? No longer just kind of that experience type thing.
It was fascinating. And overwhelming and honestly an honor, because I'd watched the season, so I knew all the folks coming on Cambodia, and did my research to figure out what they had done in the prior seasons and so forth. And so when I get there, it's just so dramatically different. So you get in Pearl Islands and you get on the boat. You get on the boat being taken to our island. And what you do within 3 days is you kind of get to know folks, have a casual conversation. Hey, so what do you do for work and all that stuff. And you get to Cambodia and you hit the beach, and literally within 2 minutes, whatever happens dictates the next 39 days. So I get on the beach with Tasha Fox, who's wonderful, runs up to me. He said, Savage, I hear you're an honorable, truthful guy. I want to work with you. I'll be right back. Jeremy runs over to me and says, Savage, I hear you're a big family man. You and I are connected. We good? Yeah, we're good. Bam. So 2 minutes. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Like, I'll be here. I'll be here.
Yeah.
It was just, it was amazing. And it was Survivor on steroids and about 1,000 times faster than Pearl Islands, right? And I noticed that I didn't get a true sense of how the game had changed and how it was so unbelievably fast. It was less about challenges. It's about relationships. It's about strategy. And you guys know, I'm an old school player. I'm loyal to a fault, and I tried to vary that a little bit by voting out Spencer, which didn't go so well. But it was, I can't tell you, I just had the time of my life. I'm so indebted to the fans for voting me in. I'm so indebted to Probst and those guys putting together the Second Chance America vote. And it's just stuff that it sounds silly, but I carry it with me forever. And it's redemption for me. And Cambodia was the toughest thing I've ever done, but I look at it so fondly, and I think about it every week. And Angkor, and when Tasha and I were there, just getting the heart kicked out of us, and what we had to do, and all those challenges, the hero challenge and the blind puzzle piece challenges. And I threw that big puzzle piece and it almost broke Spencer's leg. It's fond memories, but it's also that it was at least 2-3 times harder than Pearl Islands, and that's what I didn't expect. It absolutely kicked my butt. Yes, I was older, but the elements were just unspeakable. But to your point, Phil, I had the time of my life. I didn't think anyone knew who I was, and I get there. We go in, so we get to LA for the live show, and I walk in. So I live in San Jose, so I flew down. I walk into a green room to see Lynn Spillman and a couple of the producers, and Terry Dietz is sitting there. I've never spoken to Terry Dietz, and he was one of my favorites in Panama. And he turned around and he said, "Effing Savage." And we hugged each other like we were two brothers from another mother. Mm-hmm. And the producers yelled at us because you're not supposed to talk. Right there, it was this amazing connection, because those 40 folks, nobody had won, and we were all just dying to be on an all-star season, and that camaraderie, that connection with everyone. And then of course you get out in the season and everyone's at each other's throats and stuff, but it was just amazing experience, amazing ride.
It's really special.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
I remember back when that was going on, I was doing this with Will, and the two of us, when we first had it, we said, all right, when Second Chances thing came out and we knew it was the 40, we said, all right, we're each going to put a person at the bottom who we don't think is going to come back, but we really want to fight for them to come back. Yeah. And Terry is one of my all-time favorites. I figured, though, he was final 3. There's no way people aren't going to remember him. Like, challenge beast. It wasn't that long ago. But my little bottom was your face with you're looking over with, you weighed like about 120 pounds. And I was like, you guys should vote for this guy or go watch Pearl Islands, because it's going to be fun. And you know what? Whether people loved you or hated you on Cambodia, people felt something. So I think that they were happy with the decision to vote you back in, whether it was because they loved watching you or loved to hate watching you. I think it worked out positively. And I'm telling you, I have the receipts to back this up, of Savage just in the corner, like with the little, I don't even think you have a torch. I just think you're like emaciated. Yeah.
I lost 30 pounds, whatever. But I love that. Thank you, Phil. It was always just fascinating to me that there's a lot of folks that watched the Cambodia season that said I was a villain.
Yeah.
To a hero. And it was just fascinating. Because I'm a lawyer. I don't lie. I'm very ethical. I'm a huge family man. and to be looked at as a villain, I just got the biggest kick out of that. I thought it was fun.
Glad you could get some humor out of it.
One of my favorites, I think it was Dalton Ross, where I would always read Dalton Ross's EW recaps. I haven't read them in years now, but back then I just every time. And I remember him being like, well, now I'm crying because Savage is talking about how beautiful his wife is and how great everything is. Man, do I hate this guy. And like, I honestly think that might have actually had an impact on people not liking it, thinking, oh, he's a villain, because it's like, how dare he be crying over this? Like, how dare he? And I mean, I don't know. It's amazing. That recap was one of my favorites. I think Gordon Holmes said something similar too, and I was just dying. So good.
It was so fun to see the comments. People said, so the viewers see 1% of what actually happens in 3 days of filming, right? So so much happens, and when you're on the show, you have no idea what they're going to show, right? So I started telling the story about how I met my wife. I thought literally 0% chance that it was too long a story, right? Episode,
right?
You're never going to show that. And then I told that story, and I see all the comments about folks saying, "Oh, thank goodness! I thought he was going to say that his wife died."
Because this was coming off of, who was it? It was oh no, maybe it wasn't. I was thinking, oh no, the Nick Wilson one, which came later, which people were like, oh yeah, with the heroin and all that. But it was coming off of like Vetus in season 29, where it was very dark. You had Shireen in season 30, which was very dark. And like, honestly, your sad story had a very positive ending.
It always fascinates me when you see what makes the cut and what doesn't. And I never thought, in a bunch of, when I'm flipping people off and calling Cass and Sierra pieces of SHIT, at them, I never thought that stuff would make the cut. And it's just fascinating to see the story. You know, the editors of Survivor are brilliant, and just to see the story that they're telling and how they put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
And so do you still talk to Cass or no? Because the two of you at the Ponderosa as the two people there, was the King and Queen, was one of my favorite Ponderosa episodes of the entire show.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the backstory on that. So yes, we do. She's in Texas now. She moved from Central Coast, California. She's a kick in the pants. I really is. And so the reason, so we're at Tribal before I get voted out, and she comes in, only member of the jury, and she looks at me, and so Tribal's about an hour of filming, or hour 15, and they ran out of tape, so they had to say, okay, no talking, reboot the cameras. And when they were doing that, Cass just goes like this to me. Now she mouths 0 votes for you. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, 0 votes for you. You're not winning. I effing hate you. I'm like, oh, that's cool. At least I'm memorable. She's going to be thinking. I get voted out. Wentworth doesn't count, right? And so that's when I say to the cameras, I don't want to see Cass because she's a disgusting individual, whatever it is, because she just flipped me off. And she just said, no votes for me, and she hates me. So people were saying, like, wow, you're really harsh towards Cass. What? She just did that. You didn't see it on camera. But anyway.
Well, it ended up leading to great Ponderosa, that's for sure.
Fantastic Ponderosa.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to see when I first got there, she gives me my glass of white wine, and gosh, I just wanted to get away from her. But then we became best friends, and it was so fun to hang out with her. And my goodness, she's fascinating. She's fascinating.
She poisoned that white wine, by the way. Good thing you were able to, because you got bitten on the toe by a poisonous spider or whatever, you were immune to the poison she gave you, but it didn't work.
Yeah. So many things. Just a wonderful season for sure. Despite Wentworth.
Despite the major moment of the season.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to watch Wentworth Will Not Count, Alexa and I talked about that about 2 weeks ago. So make sure to go check out our 3rd episode of the Classic Survivor series. There's plenty to cover there. Savage, this has been great. Do you have anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to say before you head off, or should we wrap this up?
No, I just want to thank both of you, Phil and Alexa, for inviting me on. Great trip down memory lane. And so I just don't do these things. I never have. So I love that Adam reached out to me and I just had a blast. I did watch your Wentworth Doesn't Count podcast to see what it was all about, and it was terrific, and that's why I wanted to come on. Right, so I think you two are wonderful, super deep knowledge experts, and just super entertaining. So I just wanted to share a little bit, and it's super fun to be on the show. As I said, you know, the folks that watch the show see 1% of what happens. You have such almost a different experience when you're on the show, and it's so fun to share behind the scenes stuff. And I will share one thing that was in Fort Lila. So I had glasses back then. I had eye surgery afterwards, corrected vision. But anyway, so I had these thick Coke bottle glasses because I was legally blind. Had our shelter and a post right here. So when I go to bed, I take my glasses off, put it on the post. So 3-4 days in, I wake up in the morning and my glasses are gone. And I'm legally blind. So I'm looking around, and my OT and Rhino said, "Did you take my glasses?" Like, what? So we had these huge colored crabs, and about 10 feet away was this huge hole. And I said to them, I bet a crab stole my glasses. And then a savage has lost it. He's totally crazy. So I put my contacts in, got a big stick, dug about 5 feet down. True story. Huge colored crab with one claw, with my glasses in its claw.
5 feet.
So I grabbed my glasses, picked up the crab, put them in the pot, ate them for breakfast. And it took too long to actually show that on TV, but it was a really funny story.
Oh my
If you were really
God.
vindictive, you could have like used your glasses to cook the crab instead of boiling it, make it slow, painful, really miserable. But you know, hey.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Survival of the fittest. That's incredible. I can't believe it was that deep
Amazing.
in the ground.
Yeah, those things were massive. But yeah, took my glasses. I still have a scratch on the glass from that claw. Anyway.
Wow. That's crazy. That's one of the better stories we've heard in quite a while.
Yeah.
And here's the last one is, I'll just tell you how real Survivor is. I'm on the coral heads. We're on the ledge, and we don't have any food. Rhino's out in the water with a Hawaiian sling, and it's probably day 18. And because the coral heads were picked of all the oysters, we didn't have any food left. Rice was gone, hadn't eaten in a few days. And I look out, and I see a dorsal fin. And it's swimming right towards Rhino. It had to be 10, 12-foot shark. And so I'm ready to jump in the water. And then suddenly, it's about 15 feet from Rhino. It just turns around and goes away. Like, because there's no divers in the water. Like,
yeah,
the real Survivor is that, you know, there's sharks in the water. You don't want to mess with them. But anyway.
Wow.
Well, I'm glad Rhino was able to escape from there and go on the new Eco Challenge, right? He was on the new one, right? The Amazon one?
Yeah, he had a tough go, kind of a canoeing mishap. They almost drowned, but yeah, he was on the Eco Challenge.
Yeah, I actually I didn't watch it, and I didn't know that that happened. So
that's crazy.
Yeah,
I did watch it. I was hoping to see. He didn't make any of the airtime. Him and Michaela and 2 others, unfortunately. But I would feel you should watch. It's riveting. It's great.
Yeah, I've seen some of the old one, but I'll have to check out the new one.
Yeah, it's good. It's really
good. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're saying that you're very happy to have us here, but I got to say, you know, somebody who's watched since season 2 and was, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. It's pretty amazing to have somebody from season 7 who I'm now getting to meet, like, you know, now in 2021. It's just awesome. So it's great to have you on. I mean, anytime. It was fun.
Thank you. Both. Honestly, be safe. And thanks so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Alexa, tell them what we're doing next week so people know real quick.
So next week, we're continuing our classic Survivor episodes. We are taking a bit of a different turn with the content. We are going to be talking about an episode from Survivor Amazon, specifically the 7th episode, which is titled Girls Gone Wilder. This is the chocolate and peanut butter episode. I wasn't quite sure how to bring it up, but I'm just going to say it. So we'll be delving a bit away from strategy, but you know, we're talking about significance in Survivor history, and this certainly had some significance. Phil, what are you and John going to be talking about directly after this?
We'll worry about that later. If you're following our movie podcast, we're doing that right after because we're still trying to fill the air. But main thing is become a patron, patreon.com / I can't talk tonight. / Survivor Specialist. That's the most important thing. $20 patrons getting daily content, $10 patrons getting weekly, 5 are getting monthly. So go over there or just join our Facebook group. It's a lot of fun. A lot of conversation going on there. Always a good time. So Savage, thank you so much
Thank
for
you
being
so
here.
much.
This was fantastic.
Thank you both. Great to see you. Take care.